So this is recording and we are starting. So, hello to everyone. Shalom. My name is Eliaz Dandeker. I'm the owner and president of Kammodan Mocadem Publishing House. And today, joining us is the poet and author Kavita Ezekiel Mendosa, who is also the daughter of the renowned poet Nissim Ezekiel. So, a quick introduction. Kavita Ezekiel Mendosa was born and raised in a Bene Israel Indian Jewish family in Bombay, today Mumbai. She is the author of three books, Family Sunday and Other Poems, Light of the Shabbat, and Nissim Ezekiel's Poet and Father, the centennial celebration book to honor her father on his birth centenary has been edited by Vinita Agarwal and published by Pipa Run Books and Media and has been launched in October 2024, just, just a short while ago. Her poem, Advice from a Poet Father, is nominated for a Push-Out Prize in 2024. Her poem, How to Light Up a Poem, was also nominated for the Push-Out Prize in 2020. Her poems celebrate her Bene Israel Indian Jewish ancestry, her heritage, Bombay, and the beloved city of her birth, and nature, among other themes. She holds a bachelor's degree in English and French from St. Xavier's College in Bombay, or Mumbai of today, and a master's degree in education from Oxford Brookes University. Sorry, from Oxford Brookes University in Oxford, England. She has taught English in colleges in India and French and Spanish in private schools overseas. For over 4 decades, her poems have been published in several anthologies, including the Journal of Indian Literature, published by the Sahitya Academy, with the 4 yearbooks of Indian poetry in English, and the Jewish Writing Project. She also writes non-fiction books, reviews, and has co-edited a food anthology. Kavita is the eldest daughter of Professor Nissim Ezekiel. Kavita, hello. If you can open
Hello.
the mic.
Yes. Good
So,
morning. Greetings, everyone. Can you hear me?
yes, you're
Yes.
heard
Okay.
perfectly
Greetings
fine.
from Canada. I just told Elias that it's minus 27 here. So it's very cold and snowy. But thank you to, special thanks to Elias. I think he says his name a little differently from how I say it. But
Yes, well, in Israel, we
Elias.
say Eliaz, Eliaz,
Elias. I like that.
Dandeker. Yeah.
Good pronunciation. And thank you to all of you who are attending today. Um, I'm happy to have this conversation with Elias because my maternal grandparents also carried the last name Dandeker. Of course, they then went by the name of Jacob, and my mom was Daisy Jacob, so her father was Isaac Jacob. Um, Elias and I have spoken about this, and we're hoping to establish some kind of family connection. I think Elias is working on it, and it
Yes,
would be exciting to discover this link to
of
see
course.
if the Dandekars are related in some
Well,
way.
for sure, we are
Um,
related. We just have to find the missing link with your
yeah,
mother's Dandeker family and also maybe with your father's original Talker
Talkar,
family, perhaps
Talkar
also
family.
from another side. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
right.
so
So this
Kavita,
is good. And Elias, thank you for the introduction. That was very kind. And just to introduce Elias also, some of you who may not know him, he does a lot of extensive and wonderful work in preserving the activities of the Ben Israel Indian Jewish community in Israel. And I think in Mumbai also, lots of connection going on there. And I try to follow his work as much as possible. And he used to be the CEO of
Vice,
an
the Vice CEO.
organization,
Yeah.
vice CEO, called Masale, which also does a lot of celebrations and good work for the Ben Israel community in Israel, and I'm following that as well. They did a lovely celebration of my father's 100th birthday in Israel through this organization, Masale.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful to see, Gilad Jacobson was there reading translations of my father's poems in Hebrew. And my cousin Jenny, who was present there, that was a very special thing for us to see. And I've got pictures there, put them up on my Facebook. This happened a year ago, so it's
Yeah, yeah.
really
So
about time. Yeah, 1 year ago. So the
yeah, I
memories
remember.
come up on Facebook, and I can share that.
Yeah, I
Uh,
remember your cousin. I talked to on in the event. We did it in the Tel Aviv municipality house.
yes,
Not
yes.
so far away
So
from
that was lovely.
the
Yeah,
mayor's office. Yeah. So,
yeah. So that was very
Kavita,
special.
I would like to start actually with a little bit information, a little bit diving into your uh, origins, your family origins. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your parents, your siblings?
Okay. I had a little bit of a different introduction, if that's
So,
okay.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I,
okay, okay. Let's start with
yeah.
that, of course, of course.
Okay. I just wanted to say that the first question people ask me when they meet me in Canada is about my name. That is Kavita. And the next comment is about my identity. So, what kind of a name is Kavita? They ask. And how come you're Jewish if you're originally from India? Because they have never heard of Jewish people, Indian Jews. Most people, even in the doctor's office, they've never heard of Indian Jews. So when I tell them about our origins and our ties to India, they express great surprise. They want to know more about our community, and then I take the opportunity to share the information with them. And I also wrote an excerpt from a memoir which was published in 2020. And there I also talked about this surprise that people express and a little bit about the Indian Jewish community, which I'm going to talk about later on in a little more detail. So I thought that I would start with a brief poem about my name. Because Kavita is actually quite a popular name in India. But for a Jewish man, or a Jewish family, and actually my father named me Kavita. It's a little unusual because usually we are Esther or Rebecca.
Usually it's a Hebrew name,
Yeah,
usually, yeah.
those are the Hebrew names, but my name is an Indian name. So I thought I'll just read a short poem and then I'll carry on talking about my family. My poem is called Give Me Oil in My Lamp. And you know that the Ben Israelis have a lamp in the synagogue, which we light on the Shabbat. Grandmother took me to the old synagogue, walking down the potholed sidewalks of a noisy Bombay street close to her home, every square inch populated with humanity. The oil lamp in the very old synagogue hung high above the ceiling. For a few rupees, we could keep the light burning. She was afraid to climb the ladder provided by the caretaker in case she missed a step. I was afraid for her too. So he took the donation and lit the lamp. I must cover my head with a handkerchief. She would pray to the prophet Elijah for the oil never to run out. The lamp must never die out. Wanting to know in whose name he could make the receipt, I did not have a Jewish name. Change it for the receipt, my grandmother said matter of factly, or the caretaker will get confused. So I went from being called Kavita to Elizabeth. For the sake of a 2 rupee receipt, I really did not want or need. Mother did want to name me Elizabeth, I recall. It's okay, my grandmother said. When you get back home, you can go back to your real name, or your father will be upset, she said calmly. So that was about my name.
That's nice.
Yeah, and
Well,
it's
that's very
called Give Me
intriguing.
Oil in My Lamp.
It's very different than what most people usually know about India
Yes,
and the Indian heritage and the Indian culture. And this is
yes.
very specific to the Bene Israel, also all other Jewish Indian groups. So it's very profound in my point of view.
Thank you. And that poem was also published and received a lot of good feedback from that. And the lamp comes back to me in my maternal grandma's house. That old lamp was also there.
And what was the name of your maternal grandmother?
Leah Jacob Dandeker. So they dropped the Dandeker and she was Leah.
Yeah,
We called
like
her Lily. We called her Lily.
yeah,
So now I'm going to talk a little bit about my family because Elias asked me
yeah,
to tell
sure.
something about my family. So you know that I was born in a Ben Israel Indian Jewish family in Bombay, which is now Mumbai. My parents were Daisy and Nissim Ezekiel, and they were married in the Magen David Synagogue in Baikala in Mumbai. They were both born and raised there, and they both were teachers. My mom was a school teacher, my dad was a professor. They had three children, and I'm the eldest. My paternal grandparents were Moses, originally Talkar, and Diana Ezekiel. And they went by the name of Ezekiel and they dropped the Talkar. I called my paternal grandfather Papa Moses because I had another Papa who was Papa Isaac, Papa Dandeker.
Yeah.
So the Ben Israel Indian Jewish community, they adopted the name of the villages where they were located. And the Ezekiels were from the village of Tal. That's why they were Talkar. And Tal is very special to me because it's very close to Alibag, where one of my poems is set. And I'm going to actually read that poem right at the end because I have a very emotional connection to Alibag.
I love to hear that.
Yeah, my great grandfather was Haskelji. He served in the Boer War in the late 19th century. He lived in the village of Tal, but he didn't go to Bombay, but he sent his son, uh, Papa Moses, Ezekiel, there for his education. And there, the Ezekiels raised their children and in the city, and they got their education and made their contributions to society. My grandfather, Moses Ezekiel, just going back to him for a minute, he was the principal of Wilson College and he taught botany and zoology in the science department. And he actually wrote a book on the Bene Israels of India. And I published an article about him in an online magazine called Space Inc. And it was titled Celebrating My Grandfather's Book. I have the book with me and I had to cover it because I read it so many times and it's already falling to pieces now, so old. My grandmother, Diana Ezekiel, she was a teacher, first in a municipal school, and later she founded and ran her own school for disadvantaged children in an impoverished area of Bombay called Dongri. I've written and published articles about both their contributions separately. My grandfather's book was titled History and Culture of the Ben Israel, and it was published on October 4th, 1948. So it's a very old book.
I have this book,
And
by the way.
yeah, he says that he went deep into the interior of the Kolaba district to collect plants because he was a botanist. And then he collected a lot of information about the way of life, about what he calls the Ben Israel, this microscopic community, because it was a small community. And the book, very interesting, when I read it again, it had some information about my grandmother's school. And I actually had overlooked that section somehow, but when I came across it, I was quite delighted to see that it was started on 2nd November 1941 in Silver Mansion. I was trying to remember the name of the building because I have
Yeah.
been there many times when I was young. And the sewing and cutting classes they had, and it included knitting and crochet, all kinds of things in the, and we had the head of the sewing department, I remember, was Kasukar Master, we used to call him.
Hmm.
So his last name was Kasukar. I still remember. I still remember the look, how he was with the black jacket and the white pants, and the glasses. So he was in charge of the sewing department. That was especially to give women a chance to have a trade and to somehow come out of the home and learn something. And probably also they would be able to make some income by selling their
Of course.
work. Yeah, and she started the school in a temple. When the temple didn't have a session, then I went with her, and she was sitting on this low stool, and teaching these children. I still remember when I was very young. And I went to the big school in the building, and I learned many lessons from my grandmother, how to teach with kindness, how to explain things to the children, not just beat them with a ruler. There was no beating allowed at all. She was very forward thinking in her
Yeah, which was a
theories.
little bit unusual for the time setting in those
Yes,
days.
yes, yes, you're right. Yeah.
For the
So it
best,
was,
probably.
I realize now that that's where I got my first lessons, how to teach in with kindness and with reason, explaining to the students why certain things should be done, especially behavioral things. It's okay when you're teaching theory, but how to behave, how, respect, all those sorts of things. And then the five Ezekiel children, they also were very distinguished. My uncle Joe, who's the eldest, he was a professor of management. My aunt Sarah was a doctor. And my father was the third child. He was the poet and writer.
Mhm.
My uncle Hanan, and the fourth child, was the editor of the Economic Times. And then he later worked for the IMF in America. And my aunt Lily was so many things. She was TISS as head of population studies and also a veteran actor with her husband Atmaram Bende on the Marathi stage. The Bendes were very well known. My uncle was a comedian, and my aunt acted as well with him. And she was also a writer. I have read a little bit of the memoir that she had written. Now, the Dandekars, my maternal grandparents, my grandfather worked for the Indian Railways. My grandmother, we used to call her Little Ma because she was very tiny, very small, a very strong woman. She had 13 children, but 9 of them survived.
Wow.
So that's a lot of children. And of course, we remember her because she made the best besan laddus in the world. Besan laddus, besan is chickpeas, for those of you who don't know. And we would sit down and watch her stirring and stirring the mixture. So whenever my husband makes besan laddus, we remember Little Ma
Yeah.
and the besan laddu. And all my cousins are still talking about besan laddu so many years later. But the Jacob siblings also made a lot of significant contributions in various fields. My aunt Sarah, I think, Elias, I think you know Sarah, I'm not sure, or some connection with my aunt. She was a doctor. She was the eldest. My uncle Ben was a Hebrew scholar. My aunts Moselle and Ruby, they were physical education teachers and they played badminton in saris. This is what I was always fascinated by. I don't know how
I
they could.
wonder if you have photographs of them playing badminton in saris.
I wish I did, but I don't have some of those things. I'm trying to
That would be
retrieve
good.
as many things as I can. And my uncle Shalom, he was a cricket buff, and he worked for Lloyd's Bank, but he was very interested in cricket, and he had a whole small little cupboard full of trophies. This is what we loved to see when we went to Ma's house, the Dandeker home, the
Yeah.
trophies. And my uncle Joe worked in Brook Bond in Ahmedabad, and my aunt Ivy was an efficient administrative assistant. Both my uncle Joe and my aunt Ivy went to Israel in the 60s when the whole exodus of people went from Bombay, and they lived in Israel, had children, married. Some of them took their young children when they went, like my aunt Ivy. That is Jenny's mummy. You
Yeah.
know Jenny. Yeah.
Yes, yes. That I met,
So
of course.
yeah, so that's the paternal and maternal, just the grandparents and the siblings. So they
Yeah,
were
so
Talkars,
it's the Ezekiels the Telkers that became Ezekiels and the
right?
Dandekers that became the Jacobs.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then each of their so I have like 14 cousins on each side, first cousins, because so
Wow.
many aunts and uncles. There were,
Yeah.
five siblings, Ezekiel siblings, their children, and then the Dandekers and their children. Now, of course, the children have children's children have children. So there are
So
the
yeah, of course
family growing.
it's
Yeah.
growing and as it should be. And and
Now,
and you were saying
so
that you are the eldest. So
yes, I'm
what
the
about the siblings?
eldest of my parents. Yes, Nissim and
Yes.
Daisy Ezekiel. I'm the eldest, but I'm not the eldest cousin. No, my
Yeah.
cousin Nissim, who lives in Las Vegas, he's my eldest cousin on the Ezekiel side. And
So,
he's also Nissim Ezekiel, but Nissim Jr., we call him.
Yeah,
Nissim Ezekiel.
to differentiate.
Yeah, because he was born, my dad was in England and they didn't know whether he would return. And the little boy was born and they named Nissim. So
So what about your siblings?
my siblings.
Yes.
So my
So,
siblings are my sister Kalpana and my brother Elkanah. So I'm the eldest, and then is my sister, and my brother is the youngest. There's the
no,
three of them.
the
Yeah.
three of you.
My brother used to work in management, and my sister was a psychology professor. So that's how we are the three of us.
The three of you.
Yeah. So, and my brother was a late child after my parents returned from Leeds. He was born, so not
So there's a
expected.
time gap. Yeah.
There's a little time gap between those two, between us, so just 4 years difference, my
Yeah.
sister and I. So now I'm going to talk about my father because I think that was your question too.
Yeah,
Um,
that was my next question, but you already.
yeah. So there are so many stories about my father that I have told in the book, the
So,
centennial
maybe
celebration.
first, maybe you can give us a short introduction about
Okay.
your father. Of course, in India, he's very famous, his
Yeah.
poems and everything, but for the
Yeah.
other people in the audience, so if you can do just a short introduction of your
Sure.
father, the poet Nissim
Sure.
Ezekiel.
Yeah. So professionally, he was a poet, and that's more for what he's known. He was an editor, professor, playwright, art and television critic. He was born in 1924, the third child of Moses and Diana Ezekiel. And by common consensus, he is affectionately known as the father of post-colonial Indian writing in English, specifically in the field of poetry, because his first book, A Time to Change, I think Elias knows that very well,
Ni-
was kind of
1952.
a,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yes. That's right. So that is something that is very important because it was kind of a departure from the poetry that was being written before. He wrote a lot of book reviews and essays on poetry, traveled a lot in India and overseas on invitation, reading his poetry and speaking at many different literary events. So he was invited as visiting professor at Leeds in 1964 and writer in residence at the University of Singapore, among others. He mentored many young poets, and that's what also he's really known for. And his office was always crowded with poets and their manuscripts. So he was completely dedicated to the craft of poetry. He passed away from Alzheimer's tragically, which he suffered from in the last several years of his life. But during his lifetime, he was completely dedicated to, he was a passionate writer, actually, it was his passion. During his lifetime, he also published 7 books of poetry, a book of selected prose, a book of plays, and of course, he contributed to several anthologies. He was awarded the Sahitya Academy Award in 1983 for his book of poems, Latter Day Psalms. And then he received the Padma Shri in 1988. He was never big on awards and he wore his fame lightly. He was not interested in awards, totally dedicated to his work. But what I really loved most was that he was a philanthropist. He gave his time, energy, and money to poetry and to social causes that he cared about. And usually, when you think of a philanthropist, you think of a person with, plenty of money, millions of dollars, maybe someone like Bill Gates or other philanthropists. But he always said that if I didn't have a family, I'd give all my money to social work. So when he got the Sahitya Academy Award, he gave his money to a charitable organization. So that's a little bit of an outline. He had such a he was so much larger than life. Very difficult to put him into a few words. Is when I
Of
was
course.
writing my book, that's the same thing I found. Yeah,
So, and he passed away in 2004, if I'm not
in
mistaken, right?
2004.
Yeah, I think I visited his grave in Worli
Oh
cemetery in
yes,
Mumbai.
yes,
Yeah. And there, I
yeah.
think it's also written in brackets the Talker, the original surname, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay, yes. I have a picture of the just the gravestone with the poem
Yeah,
on
yeah.
it.
the
Yeah,
writings.
but I'm glad you visited. You got an opportunity. I visited in 2005, 1 year after he passed, but
One.
they didn't have the gravestone at that point. But there was a
Yeah,
sign there. Yeah, right.
yeah.
So, and I was talking about the book a little bit. So this is the book. I hope
This is the
everyone can see
the
it.
book that was published just recently, the new
Yeah,
book that you
October
wrote about your
2020.
father.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about the book, if
Sure,
that's okay.
of course,
Yeah.
of course.
Can everyone see the book? Can you see
Yeah,
the book?
if you can put it in the other side, and also the
This
book
side.
is on the flyer for this
Oh,
conversation, and
yes,
anyone that wants a link for purchase, we later on will send to any request, so
sure.
it will be available.
Yeah.
It's now available.
Yeah.
So let
So
us so tell
go
us a
ahead.
little bit more about the book. Yeah.
So about the book, as I was telling Elias before, that it actually took me about 3 years to write. And the whole idea was to just honor him for his 100th birthday. They've had so many celebrations everywhere. With the Sahitya Academy had a seminar where they've kind of launched the book, and they talked about uh, my dad in more detail. There were different speakers. And then there was a college, Janki Devi Memorial College. They talked about it. The Masale organization had celebrations. So there have been celebrations everywhere. And the book, I'm very happy to say that the book is now in the David Sassoon Library in Mumbai, and also in the Nehru Center Library in Mumbai. And I realized all of a sudden 3 years ago that this date is coming up, 2024, and it is the birth
Mhm.
centenary of my father. And the first thing I thought about was to honor him by bringing out a book. So I made an outline. I talked to my husband, and he said, "Go for it. Very important. Go ahead." So I was very encouraged with his response. And I put the book together. I wrote a personal memoir in the beginning, um, in the introduction, just to celebrate my bond with my father, because we
Yeah.
were very close. Of course, starting with my name, but I'm also the eldest child. Get a little bit of special treatment when you're the eldest, I think,
Yes. For the
because the other
firstborn.
child comes. Yeah, yeah. So I made the outline, I wrote the memoir, and then I invited different people to contribute. Those people who knew him, whom he had mentored. I sent out the emails to them, and some of them responded, which is included in the book.
Yes.
My students, when he had come to Missouri, where I was teaching English for 16 years, up in the north of India, in the state of Uttar Pradesh. And
Hmm.
there, three of my students had met him. He wrote a poem for two of them one night, because they helped him with the luggage coming up the winding mountain path to the house. So one girl had the poem. She's a young woman now. From so many years, she had that poem which he wrote. So that I included, and many poets, paying tribute to him and writing about their memories
Yes.
in the book. And then I put some interviews which I had done, something about the Jewish content of his work, and that's also in the book.
And did
So
he write a lot about his background, his Bene Israeli Jewish background? Is
in the poems, not directly. There are poems where he talks about it. For example, in Jewish Wedding in Bombay, that poem,
yes.
he talks about the customs specifically, not the religious content, so to speak.
Yeah, but the
And then, yeah,
personal
the person.
experiences and memories.
Yes, in that poem. Also, in the at the end of the Psalms, the Latter-day Psalms, he says that now I have done with the Psalms. They are part of my flesh. They swim in my Jewish consciousness. So, yeah, and in the later years, he had bought a book, and he was reading the Kabbalah, and
Hmm.
the book was on his bed, and he was telling me and my husband both that you should read this book. And it looked like a very complex big book. When you're young, it
Yeah, but
doesn't strike you.
of
Yeah,
course, but
but
people over 40, it's usually traditionally it's open for them more. Depends.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So when you're young, you don't realize. But then now they have a sort of a website, Lights of the Kabbalah, and they have different, ideas from there. And I do read it. I think of my father, and I think of the wisdom that is contained in
Yeah.
the Kabbalah.
Yeah.
But it's not the original. It's more modern versions, easier for us to understand. But sometimes different rabbis post um, their reflections on the
Course, well,
verse.
there are many ways to get to the knowledge, of course, but Kavita, I would like to know how was it growing up with a person such as your father?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yes, of course. I'm asking how was it growing up as a child
Yes.
uh, in your special family structure with a father such as yours? So I would like
Yeah.
to know.
Yeah. This is a very interesting question. I think, I mean, we knew he was writing, but to
Mhm.
us, he was our father, you know? So he was daddy, and we called him daddy. And he he really loved his children, showed it in very many different ways, you know. There are different ways to show affection, of course, for different fathers and families. And so it was very interesting. He never put any pressure on us to do anything, but he always guided us, very gentle guidance. You should read this, or you might like to read that. And there was always on the center table in the home lots of magazines. Of course, there were books and books and books. And my mother had these bookshelves made, and they had Encyclopedia Britannica, 24 volumes, you know, in those days when I was a very young child. Loved to just look at them. They were so beautiful, you know. And sometimes I would take out and I would read. I remember reading T for Titanic because I was
Oh,
so struck by this big ship that I couldn't believe that it actually, you know, hit an iceberg. And so I would read that. Sometimes I'd read other things, but it was very interesting. He had a great sense of humor. He was a wonderful storyteller. So lots of stories, and he would sing lots of Christmas songs. He would sing other songs that he had learnt in England, and he would tell stories of his time in London, where he was for 3 years.
because
Um, and,
he
uh,
lived there for 3 years, and during that
yeah,
time he published his first book.
yes, that's right. That was very interesting. The first book, because he was on a cargo ship. He was
Mhm.
scrubbing the decks as a deckhand because he didn't have money to come back, and he wanted to come back. And he had given the forwarding address, and in Marseille, 10 copies of his book arrived, A Time to Change. So the deckhands were just teasing him, you know. They have a poet on the
Yeah,
ship
for scrubbing the decks and yeah.
scrubbing the decks. Yeah, and he got a certificate. I can't believe that he did that because he didn't. He was not one of those very strong, you know, uh, tough looking, you know, well built. He was always a gentle soul with the glasses balanced on his, you know, framed glasses, delicately balanced. And his wrists were kind of always, you know, quite thin. So he used to complain that I always want to wear long sleeve shirt. My wrists are very thin. So I can't imagine him scrubbing the decks, but obviously he did a good job. So
Well, as a
he
young
got
man,
enough.
experience to see the world, so
Yeah, yeah,
part of the
yeah.
job.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
in the book, at the end, I have some family photographs, some interviews, and you know, if you have any other questions about the book, I'll be happy
Yes,
to answer them.
actually, I would like to ask you because your father was a well-known poet in India, but you yourself are a poet. So I would like to ask you a question about a more personal question, I would say, about what brought you to go on this path.
So when I was 9 years old, you know, as children do in school, you know, we start writing, rhyming poetry. Some of us have the teachers might assign like I remember there was when I was in boarding school for 1 year. I remember they had like a some competition, you know, and I wrote a poem called The Crucifixion. And
Hmm.
because the kids used to sometimes tease me, I was the only Jewish person, girl in
So
the class.
they used to
So
tease you about your
yeah, they, you know, I mean, they're just teasing whatever they heard about. Jews, and I wrote this poem. I got 10 out of 10. Those days they used to give us
Yeah.
marks, 10 and then the / 10, 10 out of
Yeah.
10. But I had started writing this rhyming poetry, and then in 1989, many years later, I brought out a book called Family Sunday and Other Poems. Then there was a long hiatus because I got married, I had children, and I was working full time in Missouri in an international school. A very, very busy job. I was teaching English, and also I was a career counselor there for the last
Yeah.
5 years of my time there.
So, so, so
So I
you, so
didn't,
you, so your first book was published in where you are still in India.
yes, in 1989. And then long hiatus, and then I kept working when I came to Canada. I've been here now 26 years.
So, so
And
when did you arrive to Canada?
1998. So we have
1998.
been, yeah,
So,
19.
and what was the reason? What was the
Well, when
thought
my
behind
son
it?
was in, yeah, that's a good question. When my son was in grade 8, we started thinking that, we should plan for the future and maybe think about further education because they were both studying in the international school. He was my
Mm.
older one, my son. So that's when we had applied it, and it took 2 years to get the visa. Then we got our visa and we came straight to Calgary because it's a
Mm-hmm.
multicultural kind of a city. And my school had 32 nationalities of students and staff from different countries. So we thought, this would be a good move. Yeah.
Opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we came for, basically for his education. And so he went to school here and to University of Calgary, graduated from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have two children, right? If I'm
Yeah,
not
and I
mistaken.
have my daughter. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And she lives and works in Calgary as well. Yeah, she has a degree in psychology.
Okay. So the whole family now, I mean, your nuclear
All
family,
four.
all the four, and now even more.
Yeah.
Everybody moved to Canada, and that's where you're based
Yes.
today.
Yeah.
And and
And
you
then I
know,
brought out a book
yes,
um, that was published in, I keep forgetting, 2021, I believe. Yeah, that's right. And it's called Light of the Sabbath. This is
yes,
the book.
I have this book.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
And yeah, I think Elias has it.
Yeah.
And that was because I had begun exploring my Jewish roots. Because I went to a Christian school, a Christian college, how you learn the Bible, but the New Testament. It was
Yeah,
missionaries.
not the Old Testament. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, at home, we celebrated all the festivals and everything, the Jewish. We were observant Jews.
Yeah.
So,
But at home, you were observant of the Jewish holidays, the Malida
yes.
ceremony.
Yes, and that's what I
Um,
mentioned in my presentation. The Malida ceremony was one which we absolutely loved. We didn't know all the meaning of it. It was sort of coming to us slowly from different sources.
yes.
And we observed Passover, making the unleavened bread and the shira, what the treacle we called
Yeah.
shira. And we went to Rodef Shalom with my grandmother for New Year. Of course, New Year meant new clothes. So, as children, that was exciting.
Of course.
And I would go with my grandmother Dinah to there and for the service. And there's so many things that we made. We celebrated, we enjoyed. Hanukkah, of course, we loved because of the candles, the light.
Yes.
I think as
Uh,
children, we don't understand the full significance of all the
yeah.
festivals.
Only
Yeah.
afterwards, when you start to ask questions and then you start to dig up
Yeah. They start
the
to
family
read,
lore, the
start.
family history.
Yes,
And
you're right.
specifically the Rodef Shalom synagogue, which I visited myself as well, which is
Yeah.
closed, but it's
Yes.
always the entrance with the lion with his paw
Yes.
on the globe and written in
That's
Hebrew,
correct.
Rodef Shalom, the seeker of peace. So that
Yes.
was the liberal synagogue.
That was a liberal sin. Yeah. So we
Yes.
were what you would call liberal Jewish, or here they call Reformed Jews
No, they
sometimes.
call it now liberal Jew. I mean, liberal synagogues. It was an older form. Now, also here they call reform, like there's
Ah,
reform, conservative, orthodox, and
right.
others, of course.
Yeah. And my father later on used to work for the AJDC, which is the American
Mhm.
Joint Distribution Company. He wasn't very keen on it in the beginning because it involved financial matters and he was not good at that kind of thing. But
Yeah,
what he loved really was um, that it did things for other people, Jewish people as well as other people, to help them to pursue what they couldn't afford to pursue. So it
yeah,
was a charitable organization, and he loved doing that. He did voluntary work there
and
because it helped the needs of others. That was his
yeah.
thing.
And your father also visited Israel, right?
Yeah, he uh, Dr. Professor Shalvavale
Mhm.
invited him to Israel, and he had a
In the
wonderful.
late 80s, I think, in early 90s, late 80s, early
Yes,
90s, something like
yeah,
that.
yeah. And I believe that he might have been there twice. I'm not sure. But I know one of my cousins sent me a picture of, I told Elias before, my aunt Hannah, who made Aliyah to Israel when she was 60 years old. She was actually my father's cousin, but
Yeah,
she lived in my grandma's house. So that's why the book is called Light of the Sabbath, because I used
yeah.
to light the Sabbath lamps with her. So that's the description. That book
So,
is, that first poem is for her. And yeah, so he went there. He read his poems, and it was very special time. I have lots of pictures and details from Professor Shalva Vale. She sent me that information.
and recently, I mean, let's say a year ago, a little bit more, I was I found out a documentary, an Israeli documentary from 1973, which I believe
Right?
I still didn't have a chance to send you, but it's in Hebrew. But I believe one of your relatives is speaking there.
Oh,
I don't know if it's from your grandfather's side, from the Telker side of the family, the
uh-huh.
Ezekiel Telkers. But I will send you, and I will. He speaks in Hebrew, but I believe he's part of your extended family from your grandfather's side.
That would
And
be exciting. That would be very exciting. Yeah.
of course, I'll send it to you. And your father is uh, being taught in Indian universities. And being
Yes.
Bene Israeli Jewish Indian poet, a so famous Indian poet
Right.
in his own right. But in Israel, uh, a few of his poems were translated. I also, in my book, The Jamat, in 2020, I published a biography of your father that was with sketches of the artist Dave Yaakov Awasker from Israel that he sketched your father in an artistic way. But I saw some poems that were translated into Hebrew by Gilad Jacobson, as you mentioned him
Yes, that's
in the
right.
beginning.
Yeah.
A few
Yeah.
poems there. I saw there is one magazine called Who for
Yeah.
poetry, and there I think Gilad is the one that translated
Yeah.
the poems, and another Bnei Israeli called Shimrit Levi.
Yes.
She
Yes.
also, yeah,
He
she's from the
translates.
Changauka.
Yes.
Yeah, she's from the
Yeah.
Changauka family originally, and she also translated a little bit of it. But either other than that, your father's books were not translated into Hebrew. They were not published yet. So
No,
is it in Israel, I'm saying. So is it something that you think it's time to do?
I think so. I think Gilad's working on something. I don't know all the details, but
Mhm.
yes, I think he's working, and that will be very exciting. He sends me something from time to time, which he has
Yeah.
translated, like the poem Night of the Scorpion
Yes,
or
I.
Poet Lover Bird Watcher,
Mhm.
and also my poem Loss, my own poem Loss. He's going to translate because it's dedicated to my father.
Yeah.
So,
And I also think that your new book
yeah,
about your father is it's a great
yeah,
example of a book that should be translated into Hebrew so the Israeli
yeah,
public will know also about this amazing
yes.
poet. And hopefully in the future also your books will be translated because this
And
is
then at the
I
end
think
of the book, I have um, about 27 of my own poems But the reason for that is
Amazing.
because some of them are dedicated directly to my father and my mother, especially my dad, and some of them just mention him in some capacity or the other. So those
Yeah.
poems are at the end of the book, one whole section. So the book is divided into sections. There's a
Yes.
memoir at the beginning, then there are family photographs, there are interviews, and there are memories of people, tributes that they share. So there's about 6 or 7 sections in the book, and then
Yeah.
the photographs at the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But the thing,
I wanted to tell you something very interesting about the
yes,
legend of the Ben Israeli people. How did they come to India? People want to know.
of
And
course.
the thing is that my husband has an uncle who is Jewish from the same community as us, Ben Israeli.
Really,
And
from
he
which
told me
side?
from his mother's sister is married to
Mm-hmm.
him, and he's Jewish, Ben Israeli Jewish.
Bene Israel.
So
Yeah.
we were often at their house when we were getting married, and
Yeah.
after that, of course. So we are related in that way. Alan's mother was the eldest sister. The second sister is married to him,
Yeah.
and he is the one who told this story of the how they came to the Konkan coast via a shipwreck.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned that in my poem Shipwreck also. It says, settling in nearby villages, blending into the landscape, they pressed the oil. They became oil pressers of the local seed. Saturday oil pressers, Shanwar Telis, my ancestors, built homes, married, had children, multiplied like the grains of sand as promised to Abraham. I am from the same seed, descendant of those shipwrecked wanderers. God's rock recurs in dreams. My ship breaks ever so often on life's rocks, but I survive, like my ancestors, pressing seeds into verse, not just on Saturday, to preserve a story of survival. So,
Amazing.
yeah, he told me
Very
about this.
heartwarming. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wrote another poem called Ancestral Shipwreck. That also tells a
Uh,
story in a little different way, but the basic idea is about this shipwreck and these 7 couples that
yeah.
were said to have survived. And I really love the whole story because legend is very important.
Of course.
Doesn't everything always have to be factual and true? But
Well,
when my husband told me, and he also said, my husband said they put the bodies on the funeral pyre, and then the bodies started moving. So the villagers realized that they were alive, and
yeah.
they were light skinned and curly hair. So I have also curly hair, light
You know,
skin. So
in every legend there is a grain of truth as well.
yeah, yes,
So,
yes.
so
So
yeah,
he told
the
me
first
that
one.
they were he had a friend in college, my husband, and he asked her, "Are you Jewish?" Because she was light skinned and she didn't have very curly hair, but she said, "No, I'm a Chit Pavan Brahmin." So
Which
there
is,
is a Chit Pavan is from the
yeah,
fire, from the fire.
from the cheetah, from the
Huh.
fire.
So I was very interested. So I started writing all this in the poetry. And Ancestral Shipwreck was very interesting because somebody sent me on my poetry page a group of American Israelis were visiting Mumbai.
Hmm.
And the guide, who was Ben Israeli, they were in Magen David Synagogue, where my parents were married. And he read
Yeah.
my poem, Ancestral Shipwreck, to them. And she sent me a message. So there's a lot of connections around this shipwreck, which
Of
I
course.
try to preserve.
And these poems that you wrote are in the new book.
Yeah. So
Amazing.
some of the poems are, and the shipwreck poem is here, and ancestral shipwreck. I'll send it to you when.
I love to read it because this story that been passed on from generation to generation from our
Right.
mothers and our fathers, grandparents, great grandparents, and great great
Yes.
grandparents, and we
Yeah.
are sharing them to our children and grandchildren and so on and so forth. It's amazing, but every version has a little bit twists and turns, but it's
Yes.
basically the
But
same.
basically, yeah. Yeah.
The ship that
So that's
arrived
the yeah.
and,
So that's the Shanwar
the
Teli.
14th,
Very
yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
The
And
14 survivors. Some of the accounts say they were of olive skin and blue, sky blue eyes. Some of them
yes.
say, so, and there is, of course, in Nogau, There's the ancient cemetery, which is in our accounts dated to 2,200 years ago. And there's the
Yeah.
graves of the original ancestors. So there's a lot of
Yes. Yeah.
history.
And I was very interested in ancestry, legend, and memory. So I had written a piece for a magazine called Muse India.
Hmm.
I'll send the links to Elias so anyone who is interested
Yeah,
can see these links.
of course, you can share them
And
all.
in that, I explored this shipwreck, the ancestry and the legend, and also this connection with the kirtans. Because I remember my Hanabai auntie, my Aunt Hannah, used
Yeah.
to sing some of this. And they had this thing about the kirtans in Mumbai, these two sisters that were going. So I mentioned that it came out in the newspaper, connecting those sorts of things. It was very interesting how all these things tie together, you know?
Of course, the Bene Israeli Kirtans it's also
Yes.
a tradition for several centuries, from the at least the before the 19th century. My grandfather from my mother's side, the Nogauka family, was
Yes.
from Karachi, and he used to
Oh,
also sing kirtans and incorporate it until the partition, and then of course the Bene Israel community in Karachi, when what later became Pakistan, mostly left, and
yeah.
so
Yeah. And with Indian Jewish people, it was very interesting that we always had we had no discrimination. We blended very well with the local population. And my father used to say that you know, he was very, when I ever asked him, anytime I asked him, are we Jewish Indian or are we Indian Jewish? And
mhm,
then my father used to say, we are both. So he
amazing.
was very proud to be Indian and very proud to be Jewish at the same time. So we grew up with, when people talk about identity, what is your identity? So this is what you learn in childhood, and this is ingrained in you.
Mm.
So I
Yeah,
have the same consciousness of my identity, and I'm very humbled and very proud, both at the same
of
time,
course,
that I can carry these two things quite
together
comfortably, you know.
and
Yeah,
more.
together.
Of course.
And tell people about my neighbor. Was talking to me one day. He's a new neighbor, and he said his parents were Jewish, and
Oh,
my husband said, "Oh, my wife is Jewish," and he said he looked at me quite curious and said she's Indian Jewish. He said, "I never heard of Indian
yeah,
Jewish." So
eh,
we
you know
started
that.
telling him the story, you know. So we get a
Yeah,
chance to share wherever we
this
go.
is the reason that we are sharing, we are writing, we are filming, we are recording, we want to
Yeah,
share our culture, our history. There is a saying that used to be said in Israel, for example,
right.
many years ago. People kind of forgot it in these days,
Yeah.
but one of the phrases was uh, Mother India, Father Israel.
Yes. Yes. That is correct.
So,
I thought if I have a chance, sorry, Elias, you were
yeah,
saying.
no, no, I'm saying it's just it's carrying on the choices that we don't have to be just one thing to define
Right.
us. We can be
Exactly.
both. We can
Yes.
be more. People
Yeah.
are diverse, and so our explanations are the
Yeah.
things we choose to define us can be diverse.
Absolutely. And I thought, you were talking about the grave in the village there, and I thought I would read my poem Alibag, if that's okay.
Of course, we'd love to hear that. Sure.
And the poem starts with a small quotation from the Beatles from the song All My Life. There are places I'll remember all my life, though some have changed, some forever, not for better. Some have gone, and some remain. Now here's the poem. It was a village then, a ferry, the only means to get across. I went there often, even defiant of the Indian monsoons. My uncle owned a grain mill. He was a jovial man with a rich laugh. His grain poured out of the ancient machines like his patient and unselfish love for us. My aunt was kind, like all my other aunts. She raised chickens and cooked spicy food, put 10 chilies in the curry when I visited. Her usual was 20. She was an older sister to my mother. She knew we liked the food less spicy. Father had lived in England, and we were accustomed to blander fare. At evenfall, we talked in soft voices. The hens were asleep. Disturbing them meant risking breakfast without eggs. Once I watched a cackling hen lay an egg. In the fields were cows and barking dogs. My cousin wove in and out of them with me and my screams on the bicycle. He teased me because I was afraid. The ocean lapped at the gates of the cottage. We walked barefoot on the sand. I skipped. He held my hand tightly so I wouldn't skip away. My cousin caught the puffer fish that looked like pregnant women. We must cook before nightfall. The lantern light was the only electricity then. A rat bit my cousin's toe once. Paraffin was the cure, as I remember it. But we got there, defiant of the rains. It was home and very sweet. Holding umbrellas over our heads, willing the rocking boat to land us safely ashore. I had heard of Jesus in school, of how he walked on water and his command to still the storm. I remember praying to have that kind of faith, the kind that stills the storm. I cannot swim, though. I want to walk the earth with grace. Alibag is a village no more. My uncle has passed, and the grain mill has passed on to new owners. I guess technology has replaced those ancient machines. I read of the great developments there, of hotels, rich residences, and tall buildings. You can get there by car or by luxury bus. I miss Alibag, the flickering lanterns, sleeping on mats, eating from thalis. I miss Alibag, the hushed whispers between cousins. I don't know when I can return to the land of my ancestors, the land of the Shanwar Telis, the oil pressers. I yearn for the unsullied rustic scenes, the dotted fields of cows and the music of their bells, the hush of the chickens settling down for the night. And I don't know where the fish sleep, in the folds of the waves or in the folds of my memory. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful document of a personal memory of a Bene Israeli life. It's very,
Different
very,
kind of life, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that was
indeed, indeed, indeed. It's a snapshot into the past with the personal experience, you know. This is
right.
what makes it very unique. And Kavita, I know that you want to share some photographs, so
Yes,
maybe
I
we
do.
can share them and then we'll open the mic for some questions if there are any, and we'll
Yes,
conclude.
that would be
So,
nice. Alan, can you help me 1 minute? PowerPoint.
one second, and
Yeah, he's just going to help me for a minute
yeah,
here.
now you can share.
Alan, something is coming up here, please, for 1 minute. Can you
So
see
we,
now?
no, not
PowerPoint?
yet, not
Oh,
yet. And you can share because I opened it for multiple participants.
okay.
So there is the share button underneath the green button.
Yeah, I got that.
So you should,
But something else is coming up.
no, I
I
don't see
did.
the,
All right, I'll try again.
we'll try, give it one more time.
Alan, can you help me a minute, please? You have to help me with the PowerPoint. Alan, I need help with the PowerPoint. Yeah, he's just coming. It's just a minute.
That's fine, that's fine. And afterwards, we'll open the mic for some
Yeah,
questions
sure.
and
So I have to press share first. Share here, share button, and now the PowerPoint. Yeah, PowerPoint is here. There. Let me send this now. Ah, Sorry, having a little trouble here.
It's okay. We'll try a little bit if it's possible. If not, then we'll try to manage to add them into the recording maybe later.
Yeah,
But did you open the PowerPoint and then you
yeah.
start to share? Okay, now we are seeing something.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Now you're seeing something, okay?
1 second. It's still not up, but yeah, now we are seeing the PowerPoint. Now you
Okay,
can
thank
share it,
you.
Kavita.
Oh,
Thank you,
sorry
Ellen.
about that.
That's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So
And
the first picture is about the Ezekiel family. My
mhm.
grandparents are sitting there, and there's a red circle. That's my dad. Can you see that now?
Yes, yes, yes. We can see it fine.
Okay. Here are my grandparents on my dad's side, Grandpa Moses and Diana Ezekiel. These are the Talkars.
The Talker originally, yeah.
Talkar grandparents.
And
Yeah.
what was the original name of your grandmother before marriage, if you remember?
Not very sure. I think it was Girard, but I don't know.
I,
I'm
I, I'll
not
tr
sure what the Takkar
I'll try to
was.
check because I have the information, but I don't know
Okay.
if I can upload it right now. If not, then okay, I don't have it right now, but yeah. Okay, but we'll continue with the presentation.
Okay. And these are my paternal aunts and uncles. The one in the navy suit is married to my dad's elder sister, Sarah. And then those are Atmaram and Lily Bende. Lily Bende is the youngest Talkar sibling. And then we have my maternal grandparents. That's my grandma, Leah Dandeker, goes by Leah Isaac. And that's my papa, Dandeker, who is Isaac Jacob. Now they're
Amazing.
Jacobs.
But by the way, I found the information that your paternal grandmother was from the Giradkar or Girard
Yeah,
family, and
yeah,
your
Girard.
and your maternal grandmother actually,
Yes,
from my information, was a
Pugaukar.
Pogaukar. Yeah,
Pugaukar.
exactly.
Yes, I remember Pugaukar. Yeah, but I didn't remember the other one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Um.
it was originally Giradkar Kaji because there are
Oh,
a whole line
wow.
of Kajis which were the Bene Israeli Jewish spiritual leaders for centuries.
Oh, wonderful to know. Great to
Yeah,
know. There's a picture of my parents' wedding in 1952, like I said, in Magen David Synagogue.
yeah, which was actually a Baghdadi synagogue, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay. Hmm.
Yeah.
And then there's me with a toddler, as a toddler. My dad was going to New York, and so a picture was taken at the airport with the garland. Um, this is my grandmother, Diana Ezekiel.
Hmm.
That's my cousin Nissim, who's standing there. I was telling you about him earlier.
Yeah, that you told about him. Yeah.
Yeah. And then my grandma's holding me when I was, I guess, very young. So, next picture is I was talking about my Hanabai auntie.
Hmm.
She's my Aunt Hannah, and we call her the Light of the Sabbath Aunt because
Oh,
she was that poem is written for her. Nissim is sitting beside me, and I'm sitting on Hanabai auntie's lap. She was an amazing woman. She taught herself Hebrew, um, herself, self-taught, and made
self-taught,
Aliyah to Israel when she
autodidact.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, when she was 60 years old. She went to, and I said, "Why do you want to go?" And she said, "Next year in Jerusalem." So that's what she
The
answered
old
me.
promise to return to the
Yeah,
ancestral home. Yeah.
exactly. And I didn't understand all of it at that time, but now I do. Stop sharing to that. Then there's my dad holding me when I was young
With you? Yeah,
with me. So this is how it was when we were young, you know.
of
Um,
course.
um, there's a postcard here, which my father had written to us when he was visiting Leeds University for 6 months. He was
Oh,
invited as visiting professor. And he had written, "My darling babies, we think of you. And every time we see children, we think of you." And he said, at the end, he said, "Hope both of you will grow up to be writers like the Bronte sisters."
Well, this actually you said both of you. So this is before
Yeah.
your brother was born, I guess.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
So this is to my darling babies, is to me and my sister.
Yeah.
This is me in Bombay in 1979 when I met my husband at that time. And this is our wedding. But my father is in the background there.
Yeah, I can see him with the
Got married
glasses
in
there.
1980. And we actually had our celebration in the Jewish club in
Oh,
Bombay. Yeah.
that's nice.
So because my uncle, that is Alan's uncle actually, was
Hmm.
Jewish. So he introduced us to that place. Now we have a picture of the gravestone. You visited the cemetery.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And there's a poem there from my father. Suppose I were a shooting star, I would want to be seen. That would be my only meaning. What is there after all? In shooting across the sky and being burnt up, but being seen, that would be another thing. So that's on the
So deep.
gravestone
And
the
I
poem.
also have the front of the tombstone, a picture there. So I'll send it to
Yes,
you to, yeah.
yes, yes, yes. That's lovely. Um, there's always exciting about Shimon Peres because uh, when my cousin Nissim had visited Israel to do some work, um, he met Shimon Peres, and Shimon Peres told him that my father was one of his favorite poets, and when he wanted peace, he turned to his poetry for his words of wisdom.
Amazing.
I have that whole story in the book, and my cousin sent him the second edition of the
Hmm.
collected poems of my father. So there, Shimon Peres is opening and reading the note and receiving the book.
See, another
So
reason why the books should be translated into Hebrew as well.
yeah, yeah, because of this special story. That's correct.
Mm.
And finally, here is the book, the Centennial Celebration volume. This is the cover
Yes,
of the book titled Poet and Father. And there is the editor, and she has written a very beautiful foreword. And also Judith Kornberg Greenberg, who lives in America, she also has written a foreword. So
amazing.
these are some of the pictures that I had.
Wow. So, Kavita, if you can,
Yes.
1 second, just stop sharing so we can open the mic maybe for the
Okay.
audience.
How do I stop
You
sharing? I
you
don't know.
have the button down where you push share, so you can push that
Uh,
button again for stop sharing.
I don't see that button here.
We can, let's try, maybe I can do it.
Maybe you can do that. Can you?
1 second. No, not being able to do that myself.
Oh, this one says leave the meeting, and I don't want to leave the
No, no,
meeting.
no, not leave the meeting, not yet. We still have a
Yeah,
few more minutes. But
yeah,
on
yeah.
the bottom, you see the share. So you can push that
Oh,
and it shows you stop sharing. 1 second, I can do it. 1 second, 1 second. Okay, I
okay.
did it. I did
There
it.
we
It's
are.
fine. And now, if anyone has a question for Kavita,
Yes, please go ahead and ask.
you can ask. And we have a few more minutes, so you can open the mics and you can open the cameras
Hi,
if
good evening.
really, Shona?
Rishona is the,
Can
yeah,
you hear me?
Yes,
Can
please.
you hear me okay?
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah,
yeah.
so first of all, this was I really, really enjoyed hearing your poetry. And as Eliaz was saying, this it was such a really a beautiful glimpse. I felt like I was there with you in Alibag and I could imagine the entire village, and it was really very moving. So
Thank you.
so thank you for that. Um, I have so many questions for you that
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I don't I don't truly even know where to begin. Um, I guess I'm very intrigued. I by I want to thank also Elias for organizing this and for asking you to speak of your family and hearing of your family story. And thank you for being so open about sharing your family. It really expresses, it seems to express a very complex and rich identity that
Yes,
doesn't
thank you.
um,
Yeah.
that doesn't require a black or white, yes or no, sort of
Mm,
dual definition.
mhm.
It's everything. And I wonder, I suppose, I don't know if in Canada to what extent it's something that's a live question, but I wonder in Israel, it's I think more complicated to espouse so many identities at once. And I
Right.
wonder if you're just able to dance through all of these identities with such ease, or if you've actually have had moments where it was very difficult to own all of these identities at once. I wonder if you could speak to that.
Like I said before, thank you for the question, but like I said before, um, I I don't seem to experience any difficulty because when we were young, we were you told like with lines from Shakespeare because my dad was a poet, so everything was explained very intellectually. Um, this to thine own self be true. So if you are true to yourself, thou canst not then be false to any other man. So if you are true to yourself, you have integrity, you know who you are, then you have no trouble relating to other people, and you don't have to put on some kind of for example, I'm in Canada. I always say I'm Indo-Canadian. Indo comes first because that's where I was born and raised. And the Jewish part of me is very strong because, as you know, as I mentioned, how my father gave us that we are Indian Jewish and Jewish Indian. So there's no difficulty in balancing these identities. In fact, there's no conscious thought of it. It's I am me, and this is who I am, and it comes through in everything you do, everything you say. When you're in the classroom, because I was a teacher, I could just be myself. Doesn't matter if children ask questions, you answer them. And they know that you're telling something which is true. They understand, even if they are very young children, they still know. So balancing the identities is when you're writing about it. But actually in day-to-day life, when you're interacting with your neighbors, your friends from different cultural backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, my husband who is not Jewish, no problem, absolutely no problem. And it's just a pleasure to have been given those roots, from childhood. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Um, I I wonder you were in India, you were married in India, I gather, yeah? You had
Yes,
you
yes.
So
Hmm.
what did you encounter? Was it challenging for you to blend the different worlds while you were in India? In terms of in India, there are certain sort of because of the caste system and sort of more distinct identities and the expectations of who's to marry whom and such. Was that an issue at all there?
No, actually, we because the families were so open. My two uncles were Hindu, and my grandmother, my two aunties married the two uncles from a completely different religion. There was no talk about it at all. They were just wonderful human beings, and they were accepted into the family. Nobody even said, "Oh, they're this or that," or where they come from, or nothing like that. They were just
Thank
sorry,
you.
someone was talking. And so
Yeah,
in my family too, all of us are married to people from a different religion, but religion does not define us. It gives us a clear identity, yes. And in my home here with Alan, my husband, who is from Mangalore, um, with his Jewish roots because of his uncle, more Jewish than I ever was after I started exploring the whole background and everything. although, I mean, I have my first-hand experiences celebrating Malida and Passover and the red mutton curry and the green mutton curry and all those wonderful things from childhood. But there's nobody objected. Nobody had a problem blending with a different family, with a different culture. And we never fought about religion at all. I think we fought about who's going to do the dishes. I don't think it was. I don't think it had anything to do with the, you know. So and now we don't fight
Thank
because
you
that's my
for
job.
sharing.
So
So,
yeah, we didn't fight much.
does anybody else have a question for Kavita?
Yes, I do.
Yes,
Am I
Shah.
audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Yes, please.
Yes. So, Kavita, thank you so much for sharing your history. It's very interesting. I had the privilege of briefly knowing your dad
Yes.
3 decades ago, before I left for overseas. And of course, the impact has been long-lasting, and I treasure it. My question is not really to do with Jewish identity as such, but I'm
Right.
curious about your dad's literary lineage, because his writing had a very old soul kind of quality
Right.
to it. So I wondered about the origins of that kind of looking at craft as spiritual practice almost.
Right.
So, and I also am curious of how, to what extent that rubbed off on you, your
Yeah.
writing.
It's a very, very good question, very profound, actually. Never thought of this spiritual aspect, but my father was very spiritual, and he was also very open-minded. He encouraged us to read everything. He said, and one of my very Christian friends, sometimes they don't understand, they object to what I'm saying and ask questions about it. But he would say that we should read Jesus, we should read the Quran, we should read, the Kabbalah, we should read. All of the people have a lot of wisdom. And I think spirituality is different from religion, because spirituality is something, it's the essence of something that who we become by believing in good things, really good things. And I think about something higher than ourselves, something. So he was a very spiritual person, and that passed on to us as well. As we went through, I went to a Christian school, then I'm Jewish, I'm listening to all of and reading, especially doing a lot of reading in the last 4 years about Jewish practice, Jewish beliefs. I'm trying to understand more. I think if you're not Jewish, you read more Jewish things. If you're Jewish, you kind of take for granted, But there was no poet in his family. My grandfather was, as you know, a botanist and a zoologist. He was like, my dad got some kind of prize when he was in school, and he brought it home, and I wrote about it in a poem. And my grandfather said, poetry? He said, what's that? So he was quite surprised. And my dad was quite hurt that he got the prize, but my grandfather is not, congratulating him. He's like, poetry, what's that? But the answer to that question is my father's whole life, So, but he said the craft of poetry, you mentioned the word craft.
Yes.
This is something I struggle with a lot, because he said you have to really put thought into the poem, and you really have to revise it 7 times. I find it difficult. Even 3 times is like enough, I hear my father's voice in my ears, and that's enough, and pay attention to each word, the lines. And this happens when you are a very serious poet like him. He was serious about his poetry.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I remember how kind he was, to all the rookie poets, young people.
Yeah.
But he was very austere when it came to examining our work.
Yes.
He didn't really care if you cried after he had demolished your poem. And yet he was so kind. So that kind of combination actually speaks to what Rishona asked you about and you answered about the truth.
Yes.
getting
Yes.
to the core of the truth, which is what I meant by spiritual.
Okay.
Very deep and cleansing process for him also.
Right. Right.
That's why it's always an unforgettable experience to have presented your writing to him. And he worked with each one, however unknown or young
Yes.
or raw,
Yes.
they were with a great respect.
Yeah.
But he was rather uncompromising
Yeah. Very, very
in pointing
uncompromising.
out
Yeah.
mistakes or repetition. And I learned a great deal from him, and it's remained with me. I'm very humbled by that. Also by his own humility. I think there was a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
lovely
He was
quality.
very outspoken, and he was very firm
Very
about
fun.
his
Yes.
opinions. And when it came to poetry, that's what he believed would be best for the poet to not just say lovely things and wonderful things and just full of praise, but to actually work with those poets like you're describing,
Yeah.
and to speak his mind. He was a very outspoken critic.
Yeah.
And he told me when I was young and I wrote a poem, he said, and you should read more, but very kindly,
Very
never like
kind.
no pressure, no sort of forcing you to, so we always had fun with Daddy. There was always the element of fun and enjoyment with him, which is what I love when I'm writing and I'm enjoying it. And if Rishona mentioned the poem Alibag and they liked it, and Elias says something about a poem I read earlier, and they enjoy it, then I'm happy. I'm really happy because I enjoyed writing it. And if the
Yes.
reader enjoys reading it and gets something from it,
Sure.
so it's like genuine, it's a good
Yeah,
response for me.
I think he was the kind of mentor who really prompted the mentee to put forth the best of themselves.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank
I
you.
think it's just
So
simply.
special that you knew him. It's very
Yes.
special that you are also here today and that
Thank you. Okay,
must
thanks.
be another question. I think somewhere Shabnam
Eh,
said something. I see someone, Shabnam. Very interesting. I don't know Shabnam. I do. Yes, that's Shabnam.
So,
Okay. I thought there was
is
another
there?
Shabnam.
No. So there is a time for maybe one more last question. So anybody else wants to ask something?
I
But
would
by
like
the
to.
yeah, so please do. Yeah, Dr.
Hello?
Verma? Yeah, Dr. Verma,
Yes,
we
yes,
can
yes.
hear you. If you want to
We
Yeah,
open
can hear
so,
you.
your camera, we can also see you.
okay. Okay. It's okay. Can you see me?
No, but anyway, you can ask.
That's okay. We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Feel free to ask.
Okay. Namaste, Kavita ji. So nice
Namaste.
to so nice to hear your such a wonderful stories and lifestyle, life, and your growing up in such a beautiful atmosphere in that time with this
Thank you.
literary background, and about your father. Yeah, the other day um, the Elias told me about it, and so I was so excited to hear about all the stories. So I wonder that how was the atmosphere in your school when you were in Bombay in that time in Mumbai?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like how was your interaction with another Hindus and Christians and Muslims, and how was the atmosphere in that time? They were
Yeah.
like you were going to each other's festivals and all kinds of
Yes.
ceremonies. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. This is something again I've celebrated in some of my poems. It was the India of one world that I grew up in, and neighbors were Muslim, Christian, Armenian Christians, Parsis. We had a rented home in a Parsi building. The landlords were Parsi, and there were Gujaratis, Sindhis. My friends across the street were Sindhis, and we just blended in naturally. Nobody talked about I'm Jewish, you're Muslim, you're Christian. We knew what each other were, but we celebrated the common festivals. We were eating during Eid, sitting down, eating in the big thal eating
Wow.
with our Muslim neighbors. They were coming, celebrating with us. Of course, I went to Christian school and Christian college. So Christmas was celebrated. Of course, in Bombay, they celebrate Christmas no matter who they are,
Yeah.
used to. And, so it was a very wonderful atmosphere in school, going to the different girls' houses. We had our sleepovers, spending the
Mhm.
weekend here or there or somebody's, house that had a different festival going on. It was just wonderful,
Oh, wow.
completely
Nice.
natural.
Do you understand also Hindi or Marathi?
Yes, Hindi and Marathi, yes. We speak Marathi at home,
Mhm.
and Hindi, of course, yes, because I grew up in Bombay, so my Hindi is good. And watching sometimes good Hindi films, Bollywood sometimes helps to keep in touch with
Yeah.
the
Still,
language.
are you watching on them?
Yes, absolutely. Watching that, eating Indian food. Once a day, there has to be Indian meal, otherwise we are not satisfied. We won't
Wow.
satisfied with just pizza or hamburger or whatever. That's
Yeah.
that's
Like
more
me,
like a snack.
now, I'm 30 years in the country, so but still, I at least once in a day or once is
Yeah,
other day, I need some Indian spices and food. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
My cupboards are full of Indian spices, and we can't make anything without those things. And at least dal should be there, fish fried and everything.
Did
Of
you
course, can't make it like way
did
back
you
home. Uh,
did you ever encounter Ayurvedic doctors over there when you were in your
uh,
childhood? If you visited someone that you or did you hear about Ayurveda, the Indian
Yes,
medicine?
yes. We knew
Yeah.
about Ayurvedic medicine, etc. But, my father never used to like doctors. I think I inherited that from him. And we try to keep as healthy as we can. But it's Ayurvedic, I have heard. Even here, I've heard of it. One of my friends who is Indian, she went to an Ayurvedic doctor. One of the teachers I worked with, they went to an Ayurvedic doctor. So, yes, of course, it was.
So you must be also exposed with some Indian like a some for some
Yeah.
spices and thing for the for the vava or something for the different kinds of problems and something to taking some herbs and spices from the kitchen.
I I haven't explored everything, but we used to follow one Indian nutritionist, and we she said one very good thing. She said, "Eat like you always used to eat." So we like our batate pohe, and we like our dal, and we like our the breakfast that we can Indian breakfast we can have. Of course, we have to. Sometimes we are in a hurry when we are working, and we have to have a piece of toast with some cheese spread, but that's not satisfying. It's not satisfying to us.
Yeah,
But
Yeah,
yeah,
I
the
think
spices.
Dr. Swarup is asking because Dr. Swarup is a sixth
Yes,
generation
yeah,
Ayurvedic doctor living in Israel
I
for the
know.
last more than 30 years. So it's
Wow, amazing. And I'm so glad he's here because he asked some very good questions, like
yeah,
everybody. And Rishona too asked me a question that I have to now keep on thinking and getting more deep into my own soul to find out more,
yeah. And
thank you
how.
very much, Kavitaji. So nice talking to you.
Thank you too, Swarupji. Yeah,
And I think that, by the way, Kavita, that during our talk, I'm doing several things in the same time, a little bit in the question time, at least, not
right,
in the
right.
conversation time. So I think the great grandfather that you mentioned, Heskelji,
Yeah,
I think his name was Subedar Major Yeheskel or Ezekiel Haim
yes,
Telker,
yeah.
and
Um,
I think I visited his grave in Alibag.
oh, wow,
And I think I
amazing.
have, yeah, and I think I have a photograph of his grave, so I can
Yeah.
send it to you. Just, because his name sounded familiar to me, so I just checked, and a photograph of him, and maybe you saw before.
That would be awesome because I collect now all these things because
So,
going back over the past 4 years since I stopped full-time teaching,
yeah.
I'm able to spend more time. So even with the
So,
book, I could do a lot of exploration and then reading more about my dad also and about his reading his poems to grasp the meaning
indeed,
of
indeed.
exactly what, because just reading one poem once is not,
No,
not enough. There are
and
many
if you read a
layers.
poem, when you're 20 or when you're 40 or when you're 60s,
Yeah.
it can be the same poem, but the meaning can be
Yeah.
extremely different, during
Yeah.
time, during age. But
And I
I will
want to
send you
send
the
to Rishona also, I want to send that ancestral shipwreck poem because she mentioned that she liked
I
Alibag.
would be thrilled.
Yeah, and definitely will send those links so you can read and
Of course, everybody can later on ask, and they will receive links. And if there's any more questions, I would be happy to refer to Kavita. I want to thank you, Kavita, first of all, for telling your story, your personal story, and the story of your father, and the story of your ancestors, and bringing it in such a poetic, very touching way. If
Thank
you're
you.
Bene
Thank you so
Israeli or if you're
much.
not Bene Israeli, everybody can relate to these kind of stories.
Yeah.
So thank you very
Yeah.
much for honoring us. And we
Thank you
had
for
people,
having me here. That's very
of course,
special.
it's a pleasure always to have you and talk to you. And we had people from Canada, from India, from Israel, from other places. So it's a multicultural thing. So thank you
Yes.
again. As I mentioned, we recorded all this session, and it will be available in the future. So thank you,
Thank you
everybody.
so much. Thank you, Rishona. Thank you,
Thank
Shabnam.
you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Dr.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Okay.
Thanks.